Became the perfect husband and father my ex always wanted me to be, but only after our divorce, leaving her resentful. My ex and I, 40s, married in college in our early 20s. We went from living in the dorms together to being married and living on our own in another state due to my job. We enjoyed the honeymoon period with each other along with being young 20-somethings in an exciting new city. Not long after being married she was pregnant and our first child was born a few months after our first anniversary. She was a psalm, I picked up overtime to cover everything. She matured way faster than I to support the baby. I was still closer to being a college dorm student than I was a husband/father/equal. We had constant fights how I wasn't doing enough to help or supporting her physically or emotionally. I kept trying to tell her how I was doing enough, how I worked 80 hours last week, how I changed a diaper last week, how I cooked my own meal, just for me, so she wouldn't have to, etc. She would explain her problems and how I could help her, but I didn't hear them. I just wanted to argue. I used weaponized incompetence before the term was coined. In my mind I was working hard and she was just being unrealistic and couldn't see how much I did. In reality, there was far more work than I realized. My ex was drowning and asking for help and all I would do was argue with her about how there was no way she was drowning. Things would improve every few months, partly because I would do a little more work, partly because she just internalized her frustrations and stopped initiating conversations about them. We had another child during this time, but this soon added even more stress and the fights grew even worse. Eventually she said she couldn't handle it any longer and moved in with family a few hours away. I tried to win her back through love bombing, again, before I knew what that was, and figured she would come to her senses. And so I was extremely surprised when I got served the divorce papers. I couldn't believe it. I never cheated on her, I didn't abuse her, I had no vices, we loved each other, how could she be divorcing me? Yet she did, and when we met with lawyers I was taken off guard by how much resentment there was towards me. Where had that come from? We agreed to every other weekend visitations. The first time I had to take care of my 2 toddlers on my own for 2 whole days was an eye-opener. I had done it once or twice when married, but she had prepped everything, pre-made the meals, picked out the clothes, cleaned the house, etc. I was still learning how to consistently do the laundry and wash the dishes every day and pick up after myself. I had gone from living with my parents, to living in the dorms with roommates who constantly cleaned, to living with my ex. I knew how to take care of a house but never had to do it all on my own. Someone else always picked up the slack. And now I was fully responsible for that and for 2 little lives for 48 hours. I remember being completely overwhelmed, and hit by a huge wave of empathy and understanding of where she had been over the past few years and what I had done to her. I apologized to her, but that only made her angrier. So I grew up. I vowed to make the most out of each weekend with my children. I learned how to cook. I actually liked cooking. I learned how to braid hair. I bought tons of unnecessary toddler supplies and packed them all in the stroller just in case my kids needed something on a walk, etc. On my own time I picked up new hobbies and went to the gym. I read the non-fiction, how-to/relationship books that my ex had been begging me to read. Overall I worked on myself and tried to become a superdad to my kids. A couple of years after the divorce I started dating again. Being a single dad in my late 20s was a turn-off to a lot of women and I was rejected often, but I found myself being matched with other single moms and really connecting with them. I eventually met my now wife, a single mom whose ex had abandoned her for someone else and wanted nothing to do with their children. And to her, I was the perfect catch, a loving dad who worked hard, did the household chores, and was devoted to her. I learned from my mistakes in my first marriage, and took all the criticisms my ex had made about me to heart and improved from them. I became the husband my ex tried to make me into. I still slip up, and still have a lot to learn, but I do that with the support of my wife. I would still see my ex every other week and the relationship improved somewhat, but there was still an undertone of resentment in each interaction. She went back to school, got a job, and raised our kids as a single mom. I tried to get more visitation as they got older but she fought back, and due to them living too far for daily visits, I only got longer summers with them. I have no idea about her dating life. I never asked the kids about her, but she is unmarried. I know very little about her life. She could be very happy and enjoying everything. But within our few interactions very little of that shows. Now, our youngest is a senior and going to graduate and I've been talking to my ex more to prepare for it. It's mostly cordial, but occasionally hints of anger and passive-aggressive comments come out. I have thanked her for being a wonderful mother to our children and raising them, and again apologized for never being there or taking her seriously all those years ago. I still feel like though, sometimes because of how she understandably treats me, and other times just from my own guilt of how I treated her when we were married. She is about to have an empty nest after devoting her life to children when I failed her, and I am living the suburban family life we had planned for but with someone other than her. Am I still the for learning from my divorce and becoming the husband I should have been with my ex? Update 1. While nothing has changed from my previous post's original question, I will always be the in my ex's eyes. I will have guilt for that for life, will continue to try to make amends with her, and will try to do better with my wife and kids. There was an event that brought a little closure recently. My youngest child, now 18, with my ex graduates this month. My ex held a party for them at her house which was attended by immediate family and friends from both sides. It was the first time many members of our respective families had been together since our wedding 20 plus years ago. We hosted separate parties for our oldest child's graduation 2 years ago. Overall, the party went very well. Our daughter was celebrated and felt appreciated. She said it felt a little weird to have her two worlds collide, such as when her siblings hung out with her maternal cousins, or having both sets of grandparents spending lots of time talking with each other and laughing. It brought a pang of guilt that my daughter didn't remember a time when her grandparents were close friends, as they were before her mother and I divorced. My wife and my ex spent time with each other and laughed a few times. My wife won't tell me what all they talked about, so my guess is they shared some common war stories about me. My ex and I had a chance to talk as well. We mostly talked about the kids and how proud we were of our daughter, how excited she is to move for college, and what our oldest child was up to. She asked what was next with our family, and I gave updates about my younger kids and their future graduations and activities. She returned that she was excited and a little anxious about having an empty nest. Her job is mostly the same but going well, and she is planning on traveling. She also casually dropped the name Mark during our conversation. Mark and I talked about doing, and I had no idea who she was talking about. Maybe he's someone she's seeing, but she didn't elaborate, I didn't pry, and the topic moved on. I suspect we each assume our kids inform the other parent about our respective life updates more than they actually do, because it didn't seem like she was trying to drop major news on me when she said it. And there was no Mark present at the party, so I really have no idea what their connection is. Near the end, I again thanked her for being a wonderful mother to our children and briefly re-apologized for my actions years ago. She replied kindly and apologized for fighting so hard against me when I requested more visitation a decade ago. Note: initially, I only saw the kids every other weekend with short summers. I pushed for more visitation after I remarried, had moved into a larger house that could fit everyone, and was in a position to take care of the kids for longer times. I asked for 50-50 but ended up with 40-60 after a bitter mediation. We returned to talking about the kids and the conversation mostly ended after that. And that seems like it. I don't see the need for other updates. I doubt I will see much of my ex. The kids, now adults, are both doing their own things, have their own cars, and can visit their individual parents and siblings as they wish. There are no more visitation drop-offs between my ex and I. There will probably be college graduations and maybe eventual weddings, but beyond that our interactions are mostly finished. While we both had caused each other frustration, pain, and resentment over the years after the divorce, and I will always have my guilt for failing her in our marriage, in the end we successfully raised two happy children who are starting their own adult lives. Each of our lives took unexpected paths to get here, but we got here nonetheless and are proud our children made it through while feeling loved. My wife and younger kids are also happy and doing well. Update 2. I honestly didn't expect much else to happen after the graduation party, but, as life has taught me over and over, just when you think things are settling, weirdness finds a way. I figured that now with both children grown, there would be a polite but distant fade between my ex and I, maybe a few texts about who's buying which textbook for college or a quick happy birthday for the sake of courtesy, but otherwise, just living separate lives. But, about a week after graduation, I got a text from my daughter at around 10 p.m. It said, "Hey Dad, you up?" Which is never something you want to get from a newly minted legal adult at that hour. I called her, worried, and she asked if I could come help her move a big couch out of her mom's basement. Her mom had finally decided to clear out some ancient stuff, including the battered beige love seat I bought at a garage sale back in 2003, which somehow survived countless juice spills, fort making, and years where it functioned as a trampoline. Out of nostalgia, and, honestly, some sense of penitence for all the years I spent ignoring the real work of the household, responsibilities, and emotions that couch had been silent witness to, I volunteered. I thought it'd just be a quick pickup with my old minivan and a quick hey. My daughter was there, looking both gleeful and slightly sheepish, and my ex was. Well, she was a whole new version of herself, not just the haircut, short, bright streak of blue at one temple, but she seemed more at ease than I've ever seen her. There was laughter echoing from upstairs, and I realized there were maybe a half-dozen women sitting around the kitchen table playing cards, drinking wine, and, when I glanced over, laughing so hard one actually snorted, which, incidentally, was my ex. And there was Mark. I met him for the first time as he navigated a gigantic box of books past me and my daughter, nearly losing his balance. Mark turned out to be an extremely friendly, lanky guy in his mid-40s who teaches high school biology and tells dreadful puns about mitochondria. He'd brought his own power tools for the move and did not hesitate to make fun of my ancient hoodie and dad cargo shorts. My ex introduced us with a smile. "Mark, this is the infamous ex. Ex, this is the infamous Mark." I guess some things don't need to be awkward unless you make them. I could see why she liked him. Honestly, it was impossible not to like him, even as a guy standing in the living room with my ex-wife and daughter. What was supposed to be a 20-minute furniture run turned into a bizarre, hilarious 3-hour hangout. My ex and I found ourselves reminiscing about our college apartment, including the time I managed to set off the fire alarm at 3 a.m. making ramen, a story that keeps getting funnier and less mortifying as the years pass. Mark and my daughter ribbed me about my vigor for wheeling heavy furniture, and the wine posse from the kitchen adopted me for a round of Cards Against Humanity that I am pretty sure I lost in record time. Nothing earth-shattering happened, but for the first time, I felt not just hoped, that there was a future where all these blended and extended people could be in the same room, laugh, and tease each other without the tinge of old pain. I felt this weird sense of, closure is the wrong word, maybe more like acceptance. There was no sense of narrative payoff or dramatic apology. Instead, it was just people living, moving, and growing. After the couch was loaded, my ex walked me outside. For a minute, we just watched the dusk, both equally tired. She handed me a manila folder. Inside was a stack of old photos and a note in her handwriting. Found these in the couch. Thought you'd want them. And then, for the first time, she looked right at me and said, we were kids, but somehow we raised adults. So, thanks for trying to do better. I honestly mean that. I drove home feeling dizzy, not in love, not in regret, but just aware. This chapter, the one running parallel to my new family and my younger kids and my loving wife, really is closing. But the story wasn't quite done. Because, as life loves to remind you, you're not the only protagonist in the plot. A few days later, my daughter called again, this time from her new apartment near campus. Her voice was bright. She shared something unexpected. She wanted to invite both her families, step-siblings, Mark, everyone, to her first art show in the fall. It was the first time she called it her family instead of my mom's family and dad's family. Later that week, my oldest texted me to ask for some help troubleshooting a car issue. When I offered to come by, they said, no, Mark and I are already on it. Mark. Of all people, my kid is calling Mark for help, and loves hanging out with him. In another life, well, in the only life I've actually lived, I might have felt resentful or replaced. Instead, I found myself grateful that my kids have a whole constellation of adults who love them, and who can be called about dead batteries and leaky pipes. And something else started to happen. My youngest, who graduates this year, is planning a trip to Europe with friends. Instead of the old jostling, the passive-aggressive texts about costs and guilt, my ex, Mark, my wife, and I now have a functional group chat. There are too many puns. The travel agent earned every penny of their fee by putting up with family group memes. I won't say everything is perfect, we will never be close friends, my ex and I, but the sincere, functional, big blended family vibe is something I didn't realize I needed. My wife, ever the diplomat, laughs about how the family soap opera is ending in the most boring and healthy way possible. She and my ex share memes and parent tips, and sometimes I wonder if half their conversations are about old mistakes I made. But the guilt and the resentment don't sting like they once did. My ex is happy, my kids are thriving, my wife and I are closer than ever, and Mark and I even trade jokes about home repair disasters. And the couch? It ended up in my daughter's new apartment, now draped in a million inside jokes and a throw blanket that says, if you can read this, bring me tacos. Which feels just right. So, if there's a message here, it's this: sometimes the wildest twist is no twist at all. Sometimes you do get the chance to become better, not for one person, not to win, but because you want to. And sometimes the hardest won knowledge pays off not in dramatic gestures, but in group texts, bad puns, and having more people show up to lift the couch than you ever thought would fit in your particular story. Update 3. I would have bet pretty solid money that, after the couch summit, things would drift gently to normal, polite check-ins, schedules, maybe the odd accidental run-in at the grocery store. But, for reasons that can only be described as life conspiring to humble me further, the universe served up a new round of chaos, this time involving our newly blended, group chat-enabled, meme-flinging extended family. Less than a month after the last update, my daughter called again. This time, though, she wasn't asking for moving help or car advice, she wanted to share big news. She'd won a regional art award for a series of paintings about growing up between two families. The official presentation was going to be at a flashy, very public gallery, and the organizers encouraged her to bring as many people as possible to showcase the importance of support systems. Naturally, she wanted her whole complicated, ridiculous, and awesome crew there. Within hours, our family group chat became ground zero for a full-blown, multi-household logistical operation. My wife began coordinating travel with Mark, now officially mom's boyfriend Mark per the family lingo. My ex looped in her parents and siblings, and both my stepkids and my youngest, the one prepping for the Eurotrip, announced they were inviting friends. Mark, never missing an opportunity for a pun, suggested we set a world record for number of exes coexisting in peace at one art show, to which even my ex replied, "You say coexisting, I say witness protection." Point, Mark. The night of the show, I pulled up to the gallery and stopped, momentarily floored. Outside, our kids milled around, my daughter in head-to-toe paint-splattered black, my oldest with one arm around Mark, still not sure if I'm 100% used to that, step-siblings, trading jokes with my parents. My ex and wife were deep in a conversation about Airbnbs for the Eurotrip. Mark was outside teaching my youngest to parallel park. And right there, in the middle of this impossible assembly, my daughter announced, "Hey everyone, can we get a family photo? Like all of us?" If you ever want a masterclass in awkward choreography, try squishing two ex-spouses, their respective partners, two sets of grandparents, a crew of college-age step-siblings, and 3 random friends into the same frame. There was laughter, tension, a debate about who got to hold the family dog, and, I swear, a moment when my ex-mother-in-law and my wife realized they'd both impulse bought the same thrift store jacket. It was messy. It was loud. And as my daughter stepped in front, arms wide, I watched her glance back and forth, her smile radiating pure joy rather than uncertainty. She looked, dare I say, unburdened. The exhibit itself was the most surreal part. My daughter's paintings spanned 3 gallery walls. One particularly arresting canvas showed a cartoon couch sailing through storms and out into sunlit calm, with snippets of family dialogue, some painfully familiar, collaged in the background. Another painted 2 tangled power cords, one blue, one orange, plugged into an impossible branching tree. In her artist's statement, she wrote, "Turns out you really can take things apart, put them back together, and end up with more than you started with." The attendees wandered and I overheard Mark chatting about mitochondria, my parents bonding with my ex's dad about tomatoes, and my wife handing out snacks to nervous strangers, classic move. Someone from the gallery staff asked my daughter, "Who are all these people?" She just shrugged and laughed. "Everyone, I guess." Right as I was leaving, my ex tapped my arm. "Hey. Thanks for coming." Her tone was soft, unfamiliar, no longer strained. She nodded at the paintings. "She's more herself now than I think we ever were back in the day. Pretty sure it's a group effort. You and me, we didn't get it right. But our kids are getting it better. That's something, yeah?" I agreed, and, for the first time, it didn't feel like an apology was hanging in the air. We stood there, 2 grown adults, both married, or nearly married, Mark later told me, to other people, watching the constellation of humans our long-ago screw-ups and occasional triumphs had unknowingly built. I felt gratitude wash over the old guilt, the sense that what started as a busted relationship had turned, after years of effort, therapy, and more than one questionable paint color, into something healthier than even my old fantasies could have predicted. And then, the kicker, as we said goodnight, my daughter, in front of the entire group, pointed at the now infamous couch, which she and her roommates had spray-painted gold for the occasion, and said, "I think everybody deserves a seat on the couch." That weekend, my oldest and my youngest both crashed at our house, a rare occurrence now that they call their own shots. At breakfast, they admitted they'd talked with my ex and Mark about how, in the last few years, things had gotten less weird and more, nice. My oldest said, "Even Mom says she's letting go. She and Mark are talking about getting a place together. Also, she voted that you and Mark are forbidden from playing DIY YouTube roulette without a responsible adult present." I protested, but my youngest interrupted, "No, Dad, everybody agrees on this one." Later that week, Mark texted me a thank you, for the help at the gallery, for the years of co-parenting, and for making space for both of us to matter to these kids. I responded, truthfully, that I was glad the kids wound up with more parents who cared. He said, "Let's grab a beer sometime. Preferably not while moving furniture." On the drive home that night, after dropping my daughters at their new apartment, I realized something I never would have imagined 10, 15, 20 years ago. I don't mind sharing the dad stage. None of us ended up with our first draft families, but it turns out patchwork is stronger than it looks. So here's the latest reality. My ex and I are finally at peace, genuinely rooting for each other. Mark's become that rare beast, a partner who enhances, not replaces, my role as a parent. My wife and I are more solid than ever, and our home feels like an open invitation, not a fortress. The guilt? Not erased, but softened, transformed. And the kids, their world is bigger, fuller, more forgiving than ours ever was at their age. If the first 20 years were about loss, misunderstanding, and slow repair, this next chapter feels like something brand new. It's not the suburban sitcom I pictured in college, but I like it a whole lot better. Update 4. Just when I thought everything had finally landed in normal territory, where group texts were mostly memes and the drama dial had fully reset to whose week is it to bring snacks, the universe came up with a new plot twist that, in classic fashion, felt both totally unpredictable and exactly like the sort of thing that could only happen after 2 decades of blended family evolution. Here's the wild update. Last weekend, I found myself, for the first time in my life, on a surprise family vacation, organized entirely without my knowledge, by my ex, my wife, and, naturally, Mark. Here's how it went down. About a month out, our kids, all of them, mine, Step, and Mark's de facto Step if you count his 2 bird-brained nephews, started dropping vague hints about the calendar being blocked off. I figured it was some elaborate birthday gag or maybe a joint send-off for my youngest Euro trip, but the vibe was too coordinated. No accidental double bookings, no squabbling over carpool arrangements, not even my ex forgetting her password to the group chat and accidentally texting my dad the details. The planning, it turned out, was covert military level, led by my oldest, who described the weekend as a peace summit, but with more sunscreen and fewer treaties. On Friday, kid number 1 and number 2 showed up at my house mid-morning, absconded off with my phone and wallet. Yes, I had a moment of panic, only to return 30 minutes later with Mark behind the wheel of a rented 12-seater van. Behind Mark, my wife, my ex, his nephews, both my parents, my ex's siblings, and, because why not, apparently, my wife's cousin, who claimed she was just in the neighborhood. Somewhere in the logistical mayhem, they'd organized a weekend at a cabin lodge by the lake, not just any lodge, but the rickety, nostalgia-soaked park where my ex and I took our first overnight family trip back when our kids thought pancakes could fix everything. And it was mayhem. The first afternoon, Mark and I ended up on grill duty. Turns out collective dadness is deeply competitive when it comes to perfectly charred burgers. The youth contingent rehashed campfire classics and held an impromptu talent show, featuring my youngest doing stand-up entirely comprised of jokes about divorced parents. Knock knock. Who's there? Transition day. Transition day who? Exactly, whose turn is it? My ex and wife broke out a bottle of wine, sat at a picnic table, and were visibly plotting something. Every once in a while I'd hear cackling and the words "Remember 2012?" It's still easier for me not to know. At first, the vibe was awkward. I caught my dad chatting with Mark, both trying not to step on conversational toes. My current father-in-law, who used to dread these crossovers, found himself in a debate about tomatoes with my ex's stepmother. There was a spectacular moment when my daughter introduced Mark's nephews as her semi-cousins. And about an hour after dinner, my ex and I found ourselves sitting at the dock, feet dangling in the water, and, because the universe loves irony, talking about the future. She was the one who started it. Did you ever think we'd be here? Not just here, but like this. All of us. Friendly. Nobody ducking out early with a headache. I admitted I hadn't. She laughed. Neither did I, but I think it works because we stopped trying to force it to be what it wasn't. She glanced at the cabin, where my wife and Mark's nephews were arguing about the rules of Uno. Sometimes you get better at things because you fail spectacularly the first time. We watched our kids, grown, happy, bickering, and supportive despite the chaos, kicking a soccer ball in a mismatched cluster near the swing set once claimed by toddlers and now creaking under the weight of half adults. In that moment, I realized something. Not only had our constellation of semi-related, quasi-step, bonus family members survived the storm of divorce, guilt, new loves, and all the petty resentments, we'd actually built something stable out of the chaos. Nobody was pretending this was traditional, but everyone was choosing to show up. That night, after a group campfire, 3 rounds of s'mores, and I'll just admit here that Mark's marshmallow roasting technique is superior, the kids presented a framed print, my daughter's painting of the fabled couch, this time updated and studded with cartoon versions of all of us. Me, my ex, Mark, my wife, their kids, the whole mess of pets, and even the beat-up van, crashing through a cartoon galaxy, arms linked, grinning, a trail of glitter paint swirls behind. At the bottom, it read, "There's always room on the couch for one more." Before bed, my wife and my ex disappeared into the kitchen together, whispering conspiratorially and giggling. When I poked my head in, expecting to be the butt of the joke, I found them FaceTiming my oldest, who couldn't make it, and talking about next year's holidays. The kicker? My ex looked over her shoulder and said, "Hey, what do you think about doing this again next summer?" My wife was already on board. Mark, in the hallway, arms full of clean towels, just shouted, "Only if I don't have to room with this guy again." He had sleep-talked about plumbing repairs and frightened the dog. So here's where we stand. We're not one big happy sitcom family. Sometimes our texts misfire, sometimes Mark and I have to negotiate dad tasks, sometimes old aches pop up. Guilt lingers, but it's background static, not the whole station. Our family, this weird, delicious, imperfect braid of exes, in-laws, stepkids, new partners, and honorary members, just rolls on. Not easily, not always gracefully, but forward. As we left the cabin, loaded down with leftovers, art supplies, and enough sunscreen to shield a small army, my youngest snapped a last photo of the couch print, slung over my shoulder and Mark's in the background, both of us failing to look cool. Later, my daughter texted me, "Not the family I pictured growing up. It's so much better." It's not closure. It's just continuation. Our story doesn't tie up neatly, but after all these years, I wouldn't trade the wild, sprawling, patchwork sequel for anything. So if there is any moral to this latest chapter, and there probably isn't, but hey, I'm nothing if not verbose, it's this: sometimes the only thing crazier than what you lose is what you find in the chaos that follows. And sometimes, the best seat in the house really is the one you offer up, no matter who shows up to fill it. Update 5. Just when I'd convinced myself that the last family episode was surely the series finale, cabin retreat, golden couch print, accidental group therapy session via s'mores, life threw an utter curveball. If all the previous twists have been about reconciliation and finding strange, hard-won peace, what happened next was something I never saw coming. My youngest, the avowed never-getting-married, world-conquering art kid, announced they were eloping. Across the ocean. In 3 weeks. Let me set the stage. I'm washing dishes when the phone buzzes. It's a group video call, which, to my seasoned dread, now means plot twist ahead. On screen, my youngest, barely suppressing a grin, my oldest, already sipping some kind of fancy espresso and smirking at the chaos brewing, and my ex, flanked by, who else, Mark, visibly delighted. My wife slides into frame, already clutching a notepad titled Operation International Wedding? As for me, I'm blinking, suds drying on my hands. My youngest lays it out. "So, we found this little town in southern Italy. We don't want big We just want you all there if you can swing it. Please don't make it a circus. Pause. But also, it's okay if it gets a little circus. Why? Their partner, sweet, shy, adored by every branch of our mutant family tree, waves sheepishly from off-screen. Cue the scramble. Logistics explode. Flights, last-minute passport checks, frantic searching for vegan Italian caterers, group chat renamed, temporarily, to Arrivederci, couch. Mark volunteers to wrangle rental cars. He's the only one willing to drive on hairpin roads after declaring he played Gran Turismo religiously in college. My ex and wife pack for every weather scenario, bring rain boots, but also linen. Also, bug spray, and somehow the infamous couch print is rolled into a duffel bag, destination, international. The first hint of truly uncharted territory comes when, at the layover in Rome, my ex, wife, and Mark all confirm, without a hint of embarrassment, that they booked the same Airbnb for everyone. Why split up? My wife shrugs. We all end up in one kitchen anyway. Jet lag makes us weirdly agreeable. The town is straight out of a daydream, stone alleys, lemon trees, the kind of blue sky you only see in those background paintings in animated movies. The ceremony is in a walled garden behind a centuries-old bakery. My youngest, radiant in a suit paint splattered to match the infamous couch motif, says their vows surrounded by siblings, step-siblings, parents, Mark, my wife, a rotating cast of extended family, and one bewildered Italian mayor who mispronounces every last name, including his own. At the post-wedding dinner, we are functional chaos. The long table overflows. My ex gives a speech that's not about the past, but about how new families grow in weird, beautiful ways, like wildflowers in sidewalk cracks. My oldest translates jokes, badly, with their smartphone. Mark proposes a toast to couch surfers everywhere, and exes with excellent taste in pasta. My wife, never one to be upstaged, gifts the newlyweds matching luggage tags, in case of family, add more seats. There's a moment after the dance, as dusk soaks the courtyard, where my youngest pulls me aside. You know, I used to wish everything hadn't happened, they admit. The fights, the moving, all the stuff that sucked as a kid. But if none of it had, well, I wouldn't have all this. They wave at the crosshatched chaos, Mark showing off his abysmal Italian, my ex laughing with my wife over limoncello, step and half-siblings trading secrets. And now? I wouldn't change a thing, they finish, fierce and certain, before running off to join their new spouse, who promptly spins them gleefully under the paper lanterns. The last surprise comes at midnight. The mayor, possibly tipsy, croons out a folk song. The whole group, my ex, Mark, my wife, all the kids, gravitates to the middle of the garden. The wedding photographer, sensing a golden moment, orders, get everyone in. And we're swept together for a picture, exes, spouses, kids, partners, blended, extended, honorary. Someone, I suspect Mark, drapes the golden couch print over the fountain behind us. The flash goes off, we're all grinning, caught mid-laugh, no longer just enduring, but actually enjoying the messy reality we inadvertently spent decades weaving. Does everything tie up? Not a chance. On the flight home, there's bickering about who left what at the villa. The group chat melts down over souvenir limoncello recipes. Mark and I debate if plumbing codes are different in Italy. They are. My ex and wife warn us that if we start another DIY project in their kitchens, we're both exiled to the doghouse. But as my youngest and their partner head off into their new life, I realize that for the first time, the future isn't just something to brace for. It's something to look forward to. The guilt is still there, memories of old screw-ups, moments I can't reverse, but it's not ruling the story. I see who my kids have become, how much more expansive our circles of family are, and I wouldn't trade a single difficult mile for this. So if the universe is still writing sequels for our strange, patched-together tribe, I'm on board for wherever the road twists next. Because if there's anything wilder than years of regret, it's discovering that, somehow, you built exactly the kind of family you once thought you'd lost for good, one surprise, one couch, and one wild celebration at a time.